So first of all, I want to extend a really big thank you to Ginny and her team here at Salomon West Van. Not only for tonight in offering it, and a great discount and the support and the knowledge and the expertise, they're also really supporting us with pricing for the race and everything that we need leading up. So really, really appreciate it, and that partnership is a really important one to us. So I gave Tom a call this afternoon. We chatted. It's been busy. We chatted for just a couple minutes, and so I called him. I said, "Hey Tom, how's it going?" He said, "Great." He's standing behind me, so you're making me nervous now. But he said, "Yeah, it's going great." And I said, "Okay, super. How are things looking for tonight?" And he said, "Great." And I said, "All right. So do you need anything from me?" And he's like, "No." I'm like, "Okay." So this is a good example of where my committee makes it really easy for me. But I'm thinking, all right, so everything's great. You're good. You don't need anything from me. He says, "Well, but if you want, you can, say a couple of words. You can introduce yourself. You can welcome people." I said, "Yeah, sure. That sounds really good. I'll do that." So I said to him, "But if you give me the floor, I'm going to introduce you guys, and I'm going to introduce you guys as rock stars." And he goes, "Yeah, whatever. You're going to introduce us as rock stars." And I said, "No, I really am." And I'm pretty sure that he didn't expect me to start that way. But I mean it really sincerely. These are two fellows that I hope most of you already know. If you don't, take the time to get to know them. Tom is a committee member. He runs all of our sponsorship. He is a Salomon-sponsored athlete. He is a track coach. He is a very experienced ultramarathoner. He is very generous with his time and his wisdom, and has just been an amazing addition to our community. So really big round of applause for Tom. And he did organize everything tonight in conjunction with Ginny and everyone. And I believe that most of us in the room are going to know Gary. Kind of hard to introduce. Yeah, Gary who? There's not. You don't even have two names any longer. It's just kind of like Madonna. It's just Gary.
Like Roxy.
Like Roxy, Gary. But for those of you who don't know quite Gary's background, it's pretty astounding. And do spend some time with Gary. Do spend some time on his blog, which is also very interesting. Gary comes from an adventure racing background. He holds records literally all over the world. He's got the fastest known time on the East Coast, on the West Coast, probably at the North Pole, the South Pole. I mean, it's unbelievable. Gary's won the Knacker. He's got the 3rd ever fastest time at Knacker, and is really internationally acclaimed. And I feel a little bit proud when I think about, not that I have any reason or right to be proud, but when I think about Gary representing us from a North Shore perspective and also from a Canadian perspective, he really is doing some amazing things on a global scene. And in addition to his athletic abilities, he's running his own coaching business. He's race director and co-race director for the Coast Mountain Trail Series and Squamish 50, and throws in things like this every once in a while. So really sincere thank you, Gary, for putting this in your schedule and making it happen.
Thank you for inviting me.
So no pressure.
Can't top that, gotta go.
So no pressure, but everybody is now expecting a rock star performance. So at that point, I'll turn it over to you.
That was half my material. No, just kidding. Yes, thank you. I wanted to say thank you. I texted Gary, because you don't call Gary, because he doesn't answer. I texted Gary and said, "Can you take a phone call?" And I got a text back pretty promptly that said no. And I said, "When can we speak?" And he said, and it was, honestly, it was like, "How about Tuesday at 5? It was like a precise time. And then he said, "Actually now, can you take a call now?" And I was in an elevator and my phone was cutting out. I'm like, "He's got 5 minutes, I got to call in." And so on and so on. And we picked a date, and the date was like 2 months ago. We figured this out probably, right?
Yeah.
This guy's busy, like really busy, coaching business and all these things. Little bearded ultra runner coming. It is a boy, right? That's true.
It is a boy, yes.
So good thing.
We're 7 months along, so August, 10 days before Squamish 50, we timed it perfectly.
And so I wanted to start the conversation with how do you also run on top of this, because I think all of us deal with that. How do you fit in, like this guy's running, what are you doing? Like mostly 100 miles a week when you're at your top, and then you're going above and beyond that when you're when you're at
Focusing
your
on big
peak.
long distance races,
So-
that's what I'll do.
Where do you fit that in? Like 50K is far. People are like, I don't even want to drive 50K. So never mind 100 miles and then doing that every week and so forth. So how do you do that?
It's about scheduling, really. It's about planning and making it a priority. We all lead busy lives. We've all got things to attend to, our jobs, our families, and I've always prioritized that more so than being a competitive athlete, but it's more in line with leading the life that I believe is meaningful. And it's getting outside and developing myself as a person in that process. So for me, I try to put running and getting out in the mountains at the top of my list. And when that's the case, as an example, on Tuesdays when I do my coaching day, I typically have about 10 hours of phone calls to do. But what I do is I always schedule in at least 2 hours, sometimes 3 hour break in the middle of the day. So I get up and before I make my first call, I put my running gear on. So when the time breaks that I have to get outside, I'm one step further ahead of making the excuse to not do it. There's obviously days when I take a nap, there's days when it doesn't happen, but it's very much about prioritizing it and, and setting yourself up for success. And run partners is another big part of that as well. So run partners keep you honest. It's difficult to get up early in the morning and get out the door and do a 3 hour run sometimes. But when you've got a group of people, Sunday Knacker training runs, you don't miss those. Tuesday night training runs, you don't miss those. You show up, and there's plenty of times when you're showing up for those runs that you're not motivated to do it and you wouldn't have done it otherwise. But usually, 9 times out of 10, by the time you're finished, you're very thankful that you did make the time to make it happen. So it's about prioritizing and just trying to work it into your life as much as is possible.
I'd say the same thing. I'm up at sometimes 4:30 in the morning and I'm out climbing BCMC or I'm riding my bike or doing whatever. And you put it in, you do it, you make it happen. But I'm not breaking any course records, so what else do I have to put in there? I guess what I'm asking the question is like, where's the intensity come in?
So, I mean, certainly when you go into trying to get that upper 1, 2, 3% out of your body, you need to come up with a deeper structure as to what you're doing. And within that, you get miles of intensity, miles of recovery, long distance runs. It's about getting a structure that's day to day, week to week, month to month, and building out a calendar in a yearly basis. So you schedule in your recovery time at the end of your season, so you're taking downtime of 3, 5, 7 weeks sometimes, depending on how big your season has been and how deprived your system is from it. And working in getting in those workouts where you're accelerating your lactic threshold, your VO2 max. You're getting in the intensity while you're also getting in the mileage to develop the muscular endurance that you need to cover these distances. So it comes down to a strategic structure of what each mile means when you're out there.
Don't do that. I think of this, and I think I told you I was going to mention this, but in March of this year, or last year, I guess, there was a picture of you on Ultra Running magazine at Hurt. And you're flying through the air, big beard, big face, big grin, flying through the air like this. He looks like a monkey. Who's seen this? Has anyone seen this? And he's over these routes and he's flying like this, and like you can see that this person is having a good time. And he's running 100 miles, and I'm pretty certain he wasn't actually having a good time. That would probably hurt a lot. And do you always have a good time? I know that I don't, and I talked about this with James. Where's James? James, we talked about this earlier on, just the idea that some days that you don't want to go. And you said this before, like I sometimes I feel like I just need to fall asleep. I just don't want to go. I make myself go. How do you keep that? Are you faking this? How do you put that monkey face on and finish 100 miles?
Well, certainly, and I mean this is relevant for everybody that's doing their first 50K right now. It's going to be an incredibly tough day. It's something you haven't done before. It's very foreign to your body and to your mind. And to extrapolate that and apply it to what we're talking about with the 100-mile distance, the Hurt 100-miler in January in Hawaii has 25,000 feet of gain and loss over five 20-mile loops. So you're just running in circles the entire time. And there are huge lows that come with that. But what I realize in an event like that, where you get a lot of human interaction because there's out and backs and you're seeing people, is the more energy, it's counterintuitive, but the more energy that I give away to other people, the more it comes back to you tenfold. So when I'm out there in those moments in that race where it's really getting bad, I make a calculated effort to celebrate the next person on the trail even more so, and they appreciate it, and then it comes back to me as well, and it pumps me up. It makes me feel better. So there's, you can call it fake it till you make it or whatever you want to say, but it's the same with coming into an aid station in the Knacker. That's a celebration. Those volunteers are there for you guys. They put the time in to support you on that day, and no matter how bad you're feeling, they'll reciprocate whatever energy you give to them. So if you come in and you're forlorn and you're hurting and you're putting that out there, people are going to start to feel sorry for you. If you come in and you've got a big smile and you're like, hey, we're celebrating, everybody's like, yeah, look at this person celebrating right now. And in your mind, you're like, I'm dying a slow death right now. I don't want to do this. But all of a sudden, everybody's cheering you on. And it's mind games. It's mind games to overcome the mental aspect of what we do to allow the physical part of it to play out.
You do get what you mean. I know what you're talking about because I know I've come into aid stations and done, hey guys, I'm dying. And you be happy about it, and you do get back the positive energy rather than the, oh, I'm dying, and they do feel sorry for you. You can see that. I think it's natural. I think it's a natural human instinct to want to.
You yawn, someone else yawns. You smile, someone else smiles. You look aggressive, someone else, they're defensive. I mean, it's really, the world is a giant mirror, and it's reflective of what you're putting out there.
Yeah.
And in a race, you can sometimes lose sight of what you're putting out there. Yeah. And if you stay focused on that and you're interacting with other people, it makes a huge difference to making you feel better inside. The one thing I've always said about ultra running and these distances is don't ever allow yourself the luxury of feeling that your pain is any greater than anybody else's. It's true for ultra running, it's true for life. It's just, that's not the case. And you can get so wound up in your own head as to what's going on with you on that day, you lose sight of the fact that the person right next to you is going through the exact same thing. And it's across the board. So small things to remind yourself when you're out there that this is normal. Unfortunately, that's the normal you've signed up for.
I was thinking, I always felt a little bit badly about that, almost like I'm the parasite. And I come in and I basically suck away the aid station to the volunteers' energy, and then I walk away. Awesome, I feel good now, and I know it's not like that really, but
no, their reward is you coming in and taking care of you. It's amazing to see the volunteers, and I say this as a race director. We don't put on the events for the elite runners that come out, because the elite runners are focused and they come out and they grab and they go. And then the more the race progresses, from the mid-pack to the backpack, those are the people that make it a really special experience for the volunteers that are out there. They're there for you, and they're celebrating your day for you. Speaking of the parasite side of things, sucking the aid station dry. The only thing I've ever sucked dry from an aid station is watermelon. Watermelon and Coke, that's my default go-to.
We'll get to that in a bit. What was I going to say? I was going to ask you about being alone. I know like 100 miles, you've gotten...
Do you know something I don't?
100 miles, 50K. So Knacker, I know, I've been out there by myself for hours. A trail run like that, I mean, I remember your husband running with Kevin, and not being actually with Kevin, he was like 100 meters ahead of me. I had no idea. And I was alone for, it felt like an hour and a half. Really, there are people everywhere. The forest is full of people trying to kill themselves. And it's all you. Like, if you get a low alone, what are you thinking? Are there things you can do? I mean, there's positive talk. Is there anything else you can do?
Well, and absolutely. I mean, and this is making the rounds amongst a lot of the experienced ultra runners right now. It's been said more than once, but the truth of the matter is, you can eat your way out of most problems in this sport. And when you're facing that low, it's time to step back and think, why am I feeling so low right now? What is going on? Where's my nutrition at right now? Have I eaten in the last hour? Have I been staying on top of my nutrition? Am I getting enough calories? Am I drinking enough? Am I getting enough electrolytes in? The mind needs sugar to function in this, and the second is deprived of it. It's very interesting what goes on internally, and you feel like everything is falling off the rails, and it plays out very dramatically inside of you, and most times you just need 100 calories, and you start to feel a little bit better. So one thing to always keep in mind when you're out there is, if you're starting to feel off, maybe you need to slow down a little bit, but you probably more than likely also need to eat a bit more. You're probably not on top of your nutrition.
Adam Campbell told me a couple of years ago that also, if he overate or he was eating the wrong thing, he would also notice a low. And there was nothing he could do about it, but he just said it was time. So if he ate too much, he said he would feel low, and if he ate too little, he would feel low. Usually it was the latter, where
Yeah.
where we eat more. So in terms of eating, what do you eat? I know what I eat, but are you a gel guy?
I've gone through the full spectrum, so this is 11 years for me now since I did my first ultra, and I was a gel guy for many years. Some of the things I'll say regarding nutrition is the hotter the day, and Knacker certainly has a history of being that hot day, the more viscous your calories need to be, because your blood is working overtime to cool your body. So your circulation system is trying to keep you cool, and when you put food in your stomach, you can only digest that food with blood. So the blood comes into the stomach to help the digestion process, and it takes away from your cooling system. I've experienced this in hot races. I learned the hard way, did some asking of experienced runners, and viscous foods, drink mixes, and gels, especially in hot races, make a huge difference to allowing your body to fuel without putting the strain on your gut. Now, you typically also always need some form of a little bit of food to digest. My personal experience is like the chews, honey stingers or cliff shots or whatnot. Having a couple of those are really easy to chew, really easy to digest, and just putting a few of those in your stomach can trick your stomach into feeling like it's had more food than it actually has, and it can subside the stomach pains that you may be feeling out there. But with nutrition, there's a rough formula that will work for 90% of people out there, and it's somewhere between 200 and 300 calories an hour. 250 is usually a safe bet. Depending on your physical size, you may be a bit higher than that. The water is dependent on the day, electrolytes is dependent on the person, but the calories are the #1 thing that people mess up when they're racing, especially when they're new. You need to start that calorie process within the first 30 minutes. You can't wait an hour and a half. Your system will be able to go for 60 to 90 minutes and a conditioned person up to 2 hours without really needing any food or food. And you can make the mistake of trying to go as deep into that as possible before eating, and what happens is you put your body behind the 8 ball at that point. So if you know in advance that you're going out for a run that's going to be longer than 60 to 90 minutes, you need to start fueling to 250 calories an hour from 20 to 30 minutes into your day, and you need to stay with that for the rest of the day. One of the more complex things about that is you can have all the best plans in the world, and the reason I say it's a bit of a mix for me is I've gone into races with a nutrition strategy that has been on paper and made all the sense. And my prime example is the first 100-miler I ran. It was storming when storming was 2 50-mile loops. I had a full nutrition strategy. For 50 miles, it could not have gone better. Every calorie was going in, every fluid, every electrolyte. And at 50 miles, I couldn't stomach any of the foods that I loved. None of them. I couldn't even think about it. So now I've got to solve this problem. And many of you, I guarantee this is a problem you will face on race day. You're going to come into Cleveland Dam and you're going to go, I don't want to eat any of the foods that I love and that I plan to eat today. And you have to force yourself to find a solution. You have to stop at the aid station. You have to find calories that will work for you. One of the things I've gotten in the habit of doing is taking a Ziploc bag with me when I race, because then I can take the food from the aid station that may be working for me on that day, put it in the Ziploc, and leave with it, so I've got fuel to get to the next aid station. So on the second 50-mile loop of storming, it was falling apart nutritionally, but I knew the formula had to stay in place. And the only things I could consume were water, Coke, and watermelon. And for 50 miles, that's what I raced on. And I did the math. I've never had to do this again. Thankfully, it was a one-off. It was, I think, 5 liters of Coke that I ended up drinking. Tom was at that finish line. I don't know if you recall, but I finished, and your response was, "You're green. Are you going to puke?" And I said, "I might. I'm not certain right now." I had an exceptional race. It was my 100-mile debut. I won, which was great. And I only was able to do that because I knew going in that you need to solve problems when you're in your races. And the #1 problem that you need to figure out is fueling. And you need to find a way to get calories into your body. That is one of the biggest things that's going to prevent you from having your best effort on any race you line up for, but especially when you're Knacker.
And knowing what's on course, I mean, especially a lot of people are going to rely on what's at aid stations and knowing what's going to be there. And I think we do have that on our site, don't we? What will be there.
Yeah.
And
I make sure you try that.
That's a great point, actually, what Tom says. Know what's at your race. The races were listed on the site. You've got Hammer Gel, along with all the other standard aid station fare. Get an idea in advance of what will be provided so that you already know the chips or watermelon or the gel that's out there. You know that those are foods that you can consume. But definitely that's the biggest thing is you can't nix your calories. And what happens with a lot of people is they may have the mental fortitude to push through, but they'll make a mistake for an hour or an hour and a half, and their whole day will be compromised because of it. And in hindsight, it's because they just forgot to take care of their eating, is what happened.
This happened to me last year. Sorry, go ahead.
A specific comment, just because we brought up Cleveland Dam and not wanting anything at the aid station, which is completely fair. The other thing for those who are new is that at Cleveland Dam, you can have your own drop bag. So it's always good to have something in your drop bag, even if you don't touch it. But that gives you your safety, your backup plan. If there's not what's working elsewhere for you, you can always go back to that.
In line with what Kelsey just said, I rarely use my drop bag, but I always pack a full drop bag with extra everything and the fuel that I may use. I rarely use it, but it's really nice to have it there just in case. You never know what's going to happen on race day. Maybe your shoes aren't working, maybe something else of your gear isn't working. Changing a shirt can make you feel like you're reborn again on a really hot day. I always put an extra shirt in the drop bag. Having that stuff there, even though you might not use it, is a really nice safety blanket, and I would highly recommend that all of you take advantage of that.
That's what I've been doing wrong all the time.
Not changing your clothes enough. Yeah, I've got 3 outfits I'll go through before the end of the night.
I was going to comment that last year I had a year like you were talking about, and I just suffered through the end of it. I was using a gel that really worked for me over 2 or 3 hours, but I didn't realize it after 5 hours. It was not going to go down anymore, and I've never thrown up racing before, and I threw up twice at the top of Seymour Grind, and actually another guy that was behind me said, "Oh, some guy puked back there." I'm like, "Yeah, me." At which point I promptly puked again, and then from the top of the grind all the way to the finish was just that. It was suffering, and like at that point I knew my way down, and I knew I could finish without eating, but I did not recover very well after that. So kind of going into recovery, you do want to eat well while you're out there, because especially in your training runs, because eating while you're out there is adding to your recovery as well.
Absolutely. So 2 more things I want to add to that before I forget. There's something I said at one of my last big races. There's nothing more painful than knowing that you're not actually close enough to the finish line to not have to eat more food in an ultra. So you can't just give up and say you're close. You can't give up on that nutrition because you think you're close to the finish line. You've got to stay on it, and you will crumble very late in the race if you give up on the nutrition. You need to stay on calories the whole way through. It's very common to get through the last aid station and to start racing for the finish and forgetting about all the things that have gotten you there successfully. I was going to say a second thing. What was the last thing that you had just said? No, I remember that. Oh, you in your long runs leading into this race, your long runs right now are your experiment days. You need to be using everything on your Sunday long run that you anticipate using for race day. If anything in that kit is not working for you, your socks, if you're chafing from your backpack, anything at all, it needs to go now, and you need to find a solution. It will not get better on race day. And that long run every week, everybody I coach, it's mandatory. They go out on that long run, and they know months in advance what works, and we work through all the solutions of what doesn't. And secondly, I task every one of them with taking their long run as if it's the race day. So the other thing is on a training run, you can get away with not really fueling as intently because you're not running as intense. You should be practicing now, fueling 250 calories an hour for the full duration of your long runs. There's also conditioning of your stomach to accept the food on the run. That's another part of training that gets overlooked. Tracking back to when I had success on gel, I raced Western States in 2009, and I was full of piss and vinegar, and I blew up in a big way, cramped up, it was hot, I wasn't prepared for the heat. I was doing really well for 80 miles, and then the last 20 miles took me 6.5 hours to walk to the finish line. But I learned lessons and I asked questions.
That's still pretty fast, by the way.
I was there. That was amazing, Gary. Don't undersell it.
And what I got from a lot of people was, well, a lot of guys in the heat that day were racing on gel, eating 30 to 40 gel for a 100-mile race. And I said, how? And they said, I've been training my gut. I've been doing this on runs. So what I did 1 year later was I got my heat training right, and I was training my stomach to process gel while I was running. And the following year I consumed, I think, 33 gel, and I ran 7 hours faster, and I finished 6th, which is one of the best results I've ever had. And it was because I was able to dissect and ask the right questions. But a part of successful race day nutrition is figuring it out on training days. That's the big thing I would task all of you with right now. Your long runs are not just about getting out and socializing and getting the time in. They're about experimenting and figuring out stuff now so that there's more predictable things that are happening on race day and less unpredictable things that are popping up.
So you're not gels at all anymore?
Depending on the race, the heat. So yeah, I will, in a hotter race, I'll definitely eat gels. I've just cycled through,
Got one right there.
yeah, I just didn't turn it off. I've cycled through a whole different, a slew of different foods in longer races at aid stations that have soup. It works really well for me. It's easy to get in, you get fluid and calories. I would take cups of soup and leave the aid station. And I would walk out of there and I'd be consuming that soup for the next 20 minutes. Trying not to spill it all over myself as I was going and getting the food out of the beard. But yeah, it's an evolution of fueling on an individual basis. All of us are very different in what we enjoy to eat and how we process foods. And yeah, so it's not always gel, but gel in hot environments for sure is one of your best bets.
So you know with the food you got in your pack, how many calories are in a gel. So you squirt a gel in, like that's 100 calories or whatever that number is, right? But when that's not working for you, and you get to an aid station and you've got potatoes and various fruits, like how do you calculate that 200 calorie amount and keep track of that?
That's a really great question, Dragon. And the honest answer is you're not at that point calculating calories as much as you know offhand you need to eat a bit of this, and drink some Coke, and that's going to give you 150 or 200 calories. Like it's not specific math at that point. It's more I know that I need to eat, and a bite of watermelon is not 200 calories. But if I take down 5 bits of watermelon, a thing of chips, and a Coke, I know that's 200 or more. So it's keeping it present in your mind that I need to get calories in, and you know that that needs to be a bulk of food to get the calories going. But then again, taking the Ziploc with you, finding the food that works and taking it with you from the aid station, just taking the food that you want to eat in that moment goes a long ways.
Yeah, I've found in the last little while through various people that baby food actually has worked for me. And last year, I think it was the Squamish. It was incredibly hot, so I was also getting hydration out of it. The little packs with the applesauce in them, and I think there was yams.
They sell them at MEC and REI now. They've actually made a huge progression into adventure-based stuff like this. They make baby food-specific gel packets. Yeah. The thing to look out for when you get them, they're lower in calories than a gel. So they're great fuel. My wife loves using them, but they're much lower calories than you would anticipate for the size of the package. So if you're going to try it out, it's a worthy experiment, but pay attention to the numbers on the back and don't overestimate what you're consuming.
What's your take on caffeine and what stage to have it or if to have it? What's your experience with it?
I like caffeine. With caffeine in particular, I'm a guy that gets up in the morning, race morning, very small breakfast, and a cup of coffee, maybe 2 cups of coffee. I think that later in a race, caffeine can do a great job at helping perk you up a little bit. Yeah. And for me, typically on the back half of almost every race I run, Coke is at every race around the world, and it's a great fuel, and there's caffeine, sugar, and sodium. And those are 3 things, and calories. Those are the things your body really needs in that moment. So I don't take caffeine pills in any race. I found them to be more of a diuretic when I did try them at adventure racing years ago. But on the back half of races, I know that I'm consuming caffeine via the Coke, and gels can have there's caffeinated and uncaffeinated gels. And I certainly believe there's a benefit to adding caffeine late in your race because you're fatigued so much. It's just going to help, perk you up just that little bit.
On that same topic, I've heard many people say that it's wise to eliminate caffeine from your diet the week or 2 prior to the event, which the result will be that your body's reaction to caffeine will be more pronounced on race day.
You're also more likely to kill somebody. When we were adventure racing, I actually didn't drink coffee, so I did exactly that. You were right. We used to eliminate caffeine 4 weeks in advance of our races, and we took caffeine tablets in the races, and it would hit you hard. It would hit you much harder than normal. I, just because I'm stubborn and like to prove a point, was told I couldn't stop drinking coffee, so I quit cold turkey for a month, and I had headaches for 10 days. So certainly, cutting your caffeine will make it more potent come the day. But going cold turkey, I didn't have a great experience and wouldn't recommend it. But cutting it down will allow your body to respond more to it on the day, absolutely.
What about other drinks on race day, like electrolyte drinks or just straight water? and that also leads into like salt tabs. I know there was a time when I was hearing stories of you taking like 75 salt tablets or something.
That was Peter Watson. I didn't get that high, but Peter.
He was telling everybody you did it. Anyway, can you speak about that?
So I used to work at North Shore Athletics. I worked there for 4.5 years. I used to manage their Squamish store for a couple of years. This is why I have the insight into the nutrition that I do, because that was the biggest thing we used to face when people came in. Is nutrition was the big misnomer that people weren't really understanding. And we would see Ironman triathletes come in that were some of the fittest people you would meet, but they couldn't nail the race. And we would sit down and help them design a better fueling strategy. And inevitably, they would come back and say, "That's the best race I ever had," because they fueled properly. Electrolytes have gone through this really fun trip in the last couple of years where there was a paper put out that said electrolytes were useless. So everybody jumped on it and everybody was like, "No electrolytes." And it's since contradicted itself a little bit. The person who wrote the paper has come back and said, well, there's some benefit to them. But all I can speak from is anecdotally, personally, and anecdotally from the people I work with. And I have never been able to race without electrolytes. For me, I'm a heavy sweater, and for the first 4 years, so 2004 through 2008, I cramped at every race I did. And cramping sucks, and bad cramps, like feeling like you've been shot in the leg and not being able to physically move at all. And it was frustrating because I felt like I was never able to attain my race goals, and I couldn't place it. I was going through all these different avenues, and I was consuming electrolytes. And what I learned was I needed more electrolytes than the average person, and it wasn't until I got those in via electrolyte tablets that I raced cramp-free and had my best race, and then have had success since then by incorporating an electrolyte strategy into my races. The thing I say with electrolytes is this. To consume too many electrolytes is actually quite difficult to go hyponatremic. It's a huge amount that will get you there. To not consume enough electrolytes and suffer the negative physical attributes of that is very easy. It's very easy to not get enough in. It's something you should be experienced with in advance of race day. It's something that should go into your long runs. You won't really cramp as much on your training runs when you're not racing at that intensity, but race day you will run harder, and a lot of people will face cramps, especially in hot weather. For me personally, electrolytes solved a lot of problems. The example that we just gave was Peter Watson, who used to manage North Shore Athletics in North Vancouver, raced the Miwok 100K one year. And we were having this whole electrolyte thing, and Peter was cramping at every race that he did. He consumed 75 electrolyte tablets in a 100-kilometer race. He exceeded his race goal, and he didn't cramp a single time. I couldn't believe the numbers, nor could he, but it is to say, that's how high you've got to go to really go overboard. And certainly with guys, we have a tendency to sweat a lot more and sweat a lot more sodium out of our bodies. So don't walk away from electrolytes, don't fear electrolytes, don't believe the hype about them not being necessary. Get to know them and see how your body responds to them.
Is the trick is finding the one that works for you, whether that's a tablet or whether that's like E-load or what product has the right amount of sugar. I know I find if I'll drink Gatorade or something like that, my stomach just cramps right away.
Yeah, Gatorade is very high acidity.
For sure.
Yep. Electrolyte tablets, every brand has a different mix. So the Hammer, their tablets are some of the lowest sodium mix of any electrolyte tablet. So you need to look at what every brand is offering. Pat, whoever knows Pat thinks that's funny. Pat is a good buddy of mine, and he's very scientific, and he sent me a document that had broken down every electrolyte tablet by how much it was actually offering. Salt Stick and S-Caps were the ones that were offering the best bang for buck in that regard. I race off Salt Stick. They're $20 for 100 at REI. It's not the direct business south of the border or anything, it's just giving an example of the fact that these are the ones that work for me. They're very affordable. And in line with finding out what works in terms of getting the electrolytes in, for me, I went through all the different mixes and the Noon tablets and everything else, and it wasn't until I got the tablets in that I was getting enough electrolytes that it was preventing my body from cramping up. So it's an experiment, but it's a worthy one.
Let's keep talking about food. Kind of race week, race morning. I know you briefly mentioned race morning, what that looks like for you. You got a 6 o'clock race. That's pretty early considering most people's training runs start at, I think they're 8 o'clock, Patricia? Is that right? I haven't been yet. Or 8 in the morning they start?
7:30 for Sunday.
Okay. So they're starting early, or not as early as actual race day. So what time, I wake up 3 hours before my race to eat. and I know that that's not everybody's plan, but anytime I'll race something long, I'll wake up, say I wake up at 3 o'clock, and I eat, I go back to bed, and then I wake up another hour and a half later, and I eat something really small just before the race, and then I'm good to go.
So this is a great question, and this is another thing that it took me years to come to terms with what worked. For me, I went to some presentations from Hammer Nutrition when they were in town, and your glycogen stores. So the theory or the science says you either eat 3 hours before a race or you don't eat before a race really until the last few minutes, because your glycogen stores in a conditioned person will go about 3 hours, and that's just considered free fuel. But if you eat, you tap into that free fuel for that 3 hours until it kind of resets or replenishes itself. The first Western States that I ran, which I mentioned having some issues at, something else I did that year was I got up at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I thought, you're running 100 miles, you've got to get as many calories in your body as possible. You're running 50 kilometers, it's very foreign. You're thinking you need to get as many calories in your body as possible. I had 2.5 bowls of quinoa mix with everything else, and it was delicious, and I was scarfing it down, and someone with me said, I can't believe you can eat that much. No, it feels great, it's awesome. I'm gonna have a great day today. I had 13 unplanned pit stops and couldn't figure out what was wrong. It took me quite a while to figure out the mistake that I'd made. So by attending this Hammer Nutrition seminar, what I have come up with that works best for me, and I've shared this with many people who just asked for advice, and most people have had great success with it. My strategy going into and of race day is this. 2 days out from the race, so your race is Saturday. Thursday is your eat everything day. It's the day to just celebrate the fact you're going to run 50K and just go to town on eating as much food as you want. The mistake that a lot of people make is they eat a lot of food on Friday nights and they eat a lot of food on Saturday morning, and your body doesn't get a chance to digest it properly. So my rule on Friday is to eat a normal, as you would on a normal day, and to make your dinner earlier. So my rule is between 6 and 8 o'clock. I try not to eat any substantial meal after 8 o'clock at night. 6 o'clock if I can, maybe a little snack later. And then I've basically got 12 full hours for my body to digest what I put into it before I line up for the race. When I get up on the morning of the race, I will have coffee, I will have a little bit of yogurt, and then 15 minutes before the race, I will have a banana and a half of a bar or something. So they say if you're not going to eat 3 hours in advance of the race, you should be eating 15 minutes before the race, because you don't want to trigger that to be burning too early. This again is something that you shouldn't be experimenting with for the first time on race day, but a lot of people I've spoken with that have had major digestive issues on race day have found that racing with less food in their stomach to begin the day has served them much better during the day. The food you're putting in the morning is not fueling your run. The food you put in while you're running is what's fueling you to get to that finish line. So don't make the mistake in believing that you're banking something because you're not banking anything that morning. So my recommendation is a very slight breakfast if you're not getting up 3 hours before, which I just never would, and then getting a couple hundred calories in 15 minutes before you're going to the starting line. So in 2013, when I ran last, that's what I did. Very little in the morning, lined up, had the 150 calories 15 minutes before the race, and then had a great day.
Do that. And as far as food throughout training, so again, I think we're coming back, each time we keep coming back to the point, try it on your training runs. I think everything is try it. Don't show up race day and, I don't know what I'm doing. And experiment with a whole bunch of stuff like I did last year. There were freezies and Hyannis. I'm like, oh, a freezie would be so good. And I think that's what started me barfing. They felt good. It was more I should have just rubbed it on my face.
And conversely, the highlight of my entire race in 2013 was the freezing. Yeah. Sorry, Kelsey, but that was the high point for me that day.
Okay, so still about food. When was the last time you went to McDonald's?
I saw someone throw that question in there.
That's me.
That's a very fair question. I went to McDonald's for a coffee when I was ski touring with some friends.
No, junk food.
I haven't.
Junk food.
No,
Come on.
Well, I mean, I have a gluten allergy, so that prevents me from going there in the first place. It's been years since I've actually had any McDonald's food. But
So the root of that question is in do you allow yourself time for? I know you're because of your gluten allergy, you are refined in what you eat. You take care, and I know. Linda eats really well, and just as a family,
my wife's vegan,
you
so,
eat well.
And she's a great cook.
So do you allow time for not McDonald's? That's just the big evil that I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, and the bigger question is like, you know, do you cheat? What foods do you consume on a regular basis, kind of thing. And you know, the word diet pops up, and I think diet's just a very toxic word. It always has been. It's a billion-dollar industry. It's what's the next thing that's gonna help you lose weight and get fit. It's all completely inaccurate. The only way I answer that is this: you all know, we all know, I know, you know, when you're eating something that's healthy and when you're eating something that's not healthy. There's no pretending that you don't understand that a burger or a bag of chips is food that isn't really healthy for you. My wife, I asked her if I could say this out loud, and she said it was fine. Before I knew her years ago, she had an eating disorder for about a year, and she was 108 pounds. And those that know her, she's a very healthy 125 pounds now. And she struggled with food for a while because of that. She had just created this food issue in her mind. And it wasn't until she was able to step back and embrace those little bits of food that you love, cupcake or the dark chocolate, and allow yourself to have those on a semi-regular basis as a small treat, that she got away from fearing food altogether. And I think the biggest thing is we often deprive ourselves of what we want in a reasonable portion, and then we end up with unreasonable portions and consuming foods that are just, we all know, aren't healthy for us. My wife is vegan. She cooks great. We eat vegan dinners. I'm not vegan. I supplement with some protein sources. I eat very healthy. We eat dark chocolate before bed 5 or 6 days a week. It is not something that we stress about. It's not unhealthy for you. It's very healthy for us.
How much can I eat?
And I was visiting a friend of mine on Vancouver Island about 6 years ago, and my old adventure racing partner Todd Novak, who was 6'3" and just this big, bulky, very talented guy, and he had a triathlete friend that came over to join us. And Linda and I pulled out our chocolate bar, and he couldn't believe that we were doing this. And we couldn't believe.
Like a lit up cigarette.
Yeah, it was literally like, oh, you guys, what? No, I can't be near that. I can't breathe that stuff in. You can eat these foods. They're not what kill you. It's eating the junk food on a regular basis. It's coming to terms with what's healthy and getting it into your diet. And I mean, I know as well as anybody, when I first moved out this way, so I moved to BC in 2004. I grew up in Newfoundland. I moved west in '96. So I've officially been west for about 6 months longer than I've been east in my life. I went over the cusp. So I've been out west for 19 years, and I left Newfoundland at 19 and change. I used to survive on milk, 2% milk, and white bread and peanut butter jam sandwiches. Like, I've been there. I've led that life where the diet was completely unhealthy, and that was a part of my progression into this. Again, it wasn't about trying to be a fast runner and win races. It was about trying to lead a lifestyle that made sense, that was from top to bottom, you know, that was rewarding. And a part of that, as you treat your body better, as you work harder with what you're doing, you want to work harder at your diet. And it becomes, I think, a little bit easier to eliminate those foods over time when you know that they shouldn't be in there. And it's been a long process, but I've gotten to that point where I'm very comfortable with what I eat. I never diet, I never weigh myself. And I know I fluctuate every now and then, and I don't care, because it's not pertinent, and especially for what we're doing. You're getting out there, you're running hard, you're training hard, you're running long distances. You need to fuel your body, just fuel it intelligently.
Great. So one last question on food before I get to a couple other topics. You go on a long run, 4 hours, you go up BCMC, you run down BCMC, and then you go back up, and then you run back down, and you go back, you know what you do. And you come home, what do you eat? What is a post-run recovery meal? So this is great because it ties right back in. I used to default years ago to like fries and Coke kind of thing, because your body needs salt and sugar. That's what you're wanting after those workouts. That's what your body desires. And it's taken focus to move away from the junk food reward into a healthy version. And the big thing with your workouts is your recovery will be expedited if you're getting food in within 30, 45 minutes max. If you're having a hard workout, you're not eating for 60 plus minutes, you've compromised your recovery for your next workout. So I try to have some form of healthy food, whether that's a shake, a mix, an energy bar. I try not to eat too many of those, but still. But I plan in advance, that's the thing. I usually have some form of food, and I've defaulted to a lot of nuts, really. Cashews and almonds and whatnot. That for me is, they're delicious, they're great fuel, they're satiating, And he'll share them if you run with him.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's very much your body is asking for something, and you need to not give in to that immediate tendency to put the junk food straight in there. A little bit of planning goes a long way with that, and eating is very necessary for your recovery from those workouts to allow you to get up, eat your glycogen stores, to replenish your glycogen stores, so you can go out again the next day and the following day and the following day.
That's a good segue, actually, because I want to get into injury, which seems inevitable at some point in a career that is 50K, 100K, 100K.
How many people are injured right now? Exactly.
And I think part of that injury comes, I mean, what we're doing is we're stressing our bodies over and over and over and over, and so they adapt and eventually get stronger and stronger, and you become a superhero. And then you're on a poster. And I think we get these injuries, and I wondered if you could just quickly talk about your injury and a little bit of kind of the mindset around that, what you did about it. I'm talking about your big one in Hawaii, where we all saw the video of you.
So I hit my head really hard, and
you
everything
don't
became
remember it.
easier after that.
Do you want me to demonstrate it?
I broke my foot twice, and in the running world, breaking your foot sucks. A Jones fracture is a runner's worst nightmare. So the first time I broke my foot, I was in Oregon for a Montreal Mountain Hardware get-together. I used to run for them. And there was a fresh couple of, like an inch of snow that had fallen overnight. And I went out on a run with Max King and Jeff Rose. And these guys, top of the sport, nothing but admiration, had only met them fleetingly, so we were just kind of getting to know each other, went out on a run. And I rolled my foot, I slipped off of a snow-covered rock, and my foot compounded, and all my weight snapped the bone in my foot. And for some reason, in that moment, I didn't want them to think that I was weak or making excuses, so I didn't make a noise, and I ran for 3 kilometers before we stopped at what was supposed to be our turnaround point. And Max said, "Oh, I'm feeling pretty good, we should go a little bit further, don't you think?" And I said, "I think I broke my foot." And Jeff said, "What? You haven't even said when." So they continued on, and I hobbled back. I buried my foot in a snowbank, and that night at the Montreal Mountain Hardware get-together, I was the speaker that was going to take the stage. So I didn't want to miss that, so I drank some alcohol and walked out on stage and made jokes about my foot hurting, had a very successful evening, and the next morning when I woke up, Jeff Rose was my roommate, and I physically couldn't move myself out of bed because of the pain in my foot. So he had to lift my foot into an ice bucket, and then I got driven to the hospital in Bend, Oregon. BCAA travel insurance is a wonderful thing. For just $75 a year, you'll never have to worry about out-of-country medical expenses. So I was told on the spot it was a Jones fracture and that this was bad. In the U.S., they try to surgically repair a Jones fracture. It's very common for that. And I did a lot of research, and I found that there's just as much potential to refracture and have issues afterwards with the pin that's in your foot as there is for a full natural recovery. So I decided against surgery. And I went about, it was non-weight bearing on crutches for 4 months. And I successfully healed, got off crutches, got back to running. Linda and I went to Hawaii for a vacation, a house sit for some friends in May. And I was still planning to run Western States in UTMB, having missed 4 months, so I was cramming for my exam. And on the second to last day, I happened to be wearing my GoPro, which I've never worn since. It's there. Every time I touch it, I stop, and I should just give it away because it's just got this emotional scar. I was running on the Hurt course, and I heard my foot break. And I know the Hurt course intimately because this was after having run and won on that race. And I knew where I was not a good place to be. I didn't have a phone. Linda was off doing her own thing, and I knew no one was going to find me out there. So I was about a mile and a half from where I would likely run into somebody. So I had to hobble with 2 hands, 1 leg, and I actually forgot I was wearing the GoPro for a lot of it because obviously you're very emotionally distraught in that moment. And I hobbled myself to this intersection on the trail, and then I started yelling out for help, and thankfully there was some biologists that were working nearby, and I just saw her when I was back in Hawaii in January actually. She came down, gave me her phone, we called search and rescue, and they were going to send a helicopter. And I said, no, can't pay for helicopter. That's covered by insurance. Let's just put some crutches in here. I know how these work. I just got off of them. I'll hobble myself on out of here. And they said, don't have time for that BS. We are very busy. We'll be there in 45 minutes with a helicopter. And they showed up, dropped a basket 60 feet below the helicopter. I hopped in, and then the big guy was my seatbelt. So he got in this basket, this fishnet basket, and he held on to both sides in front of me, and the helicopter took off, and we flew over the Hawaiian mountains. And 24 hours before that, I said to Linda, these mountains are so beautiful. It would be so wonderful if we could. So, I was back on crutches for another 4.5 months. And so that was 8.5 months of non-weight bearing on my foot. And at this point, a friend of mine in Utah, an ultra runner, stepped in and said, I have a lot of experience with Jones fractures. I see what you're going through. I can give you a plan. You're not going to like it, but I promise you it'll work. And I said, please. And basically the plan was, in October of 11, you can run 1 kilometer in your first week. And in your second week, you can run 1 kilometer twice. And in your third week, you can run 1 kilometer 3 times. And in your fourth week, you can run 2 kilometers. It was terrible, but it worked. And I got myself back to health and fitness, but I lost a year of my running in that process. And unfortunately, when I did get back to racing in 2012, my mind was in my 2010 body, and my body was in my 2012 recovering from injury body, and they weren't aligned in a lot of the things I was doing that year. But when I was injured, I was forced to come to terms with my mortality as a runner. My doctor said, you may never be able to run down technical trails again, and that's my specialty. That's where I've made my running career. So to get back to here was a very special journey, but in that I was also forced to reassess certain things and to realize that running is just one element of who we all are, and I had to explore other elements of who I was, and it was actually a bit of a cathartic time that allowed me to appreciate running more than I ever had before, and to explore other avenues, which led me into race directing and coaching and what I'm doing now. So it was actually something I would never want to go through again, but it did lead to, I told myself, it's a big negative and I need to pull some positives out of this. But certainly, injuries in running in particular happen, and broken bones in the feet are quite common for what we do, because we put a lot of stress on the body. So I got off crutches, and I had a neck injury that wouldn't go away. And it lasted 2 years, and for 2 years, I couldn't do anything with my upper body. I couldn't do a push-up, I couldn't lift things. I was working on my computer and I was really struggling with neck and back pain, and I saw a lot of specialized people and nobody could figure it out. And I thought I was going to be left with a life of chronic pain. It didn't affect my running, so I could run and I could train, but if I took hiking poles with me on a run, within 5 minutes my neck seized up, and it was a terrible time, because you're celebrating being able to run again, but you've got this injury that isn't evident. Couldn't ride my road bike. It was just, there was nothing I could do but run. And what I'm getting at with this is that I would go through these moments of thinking someone was going to solve it, the disappointment of them not figuring it out, and then feeling lost and feeling like it was going to be chronic forever, and then finding someone else and getting excited again. And eventually, after 2 years, I found someone who said, I know what this is. I've seen this before, and I can fix this for you. He was a chiropractor, and I had tried chiropractic before that without success. And he said, we're going to do 4 weeks, and I promise you it's going to hurt more first, but we're going to get somewhere. And the first 2 weeks were terrible, and by the 3rd week I thought this might be working, but I didn't want to get excited. 4th week I knew it was working. 5, 6 weeks, and it was done, it was over. I've gone back to see him twice, 3 times in the last couple of years. So what happens when we get injured is that we have a tendency to just sideline ourselves and wait for the injury to go away and hope that it happens. And our bodies don't work that way. And you need to actively be sourcing solutions for injuries. Whatever injury you're in, you need to actively work to find a solution for that. And it's amazing how our bodies react to aggressive treatments. And when you're trying to find these solutions to what may be a chronic injury, what may sideline you for an extensive period of time, you need to give one person an honest chunk of time, which I feel is 3 to 5 weeks. And if you're not getting anywhere, you need to ask the question to someone else. And you need to ask the question to someone else. And eventually you will find someone that says, oh yeah, I know exactly what this is, I can fix it. But until then, you're just helping someone else gain experience in something they're not familiar with. So for me, it was a long journey to figure that out. And the number one thing is you have to be aggressive in trying to solve this, because just sitting down and waiting for it to go away rarely leads to a successful recovery from a running injury. Are there any questions specifically about running injuries? Like any injuries specifically? Jane? No? Ron?
What precisely is a Jones fracture? What bones?
So, good question. So the Jones fracture on your foot is your pinky toe. It's your smallest bone. And you can fracture your metatarsal in any of this range, and it's okay. But the closer to the end of your foot that it gets, the less blood flow that it gets. So a Jones fracture is typically in this knuckle of your pinky toe, and it gets no blood flow. So what happens is you've got a fracture and it doesn't talk to itself. It doesn't talk to each other. And they can sit there for quite some time without actually starting to heal again. That's the frustrating process of it all. You go back to get an x-ray 6 weeks later and it looks the exact same, and you've been non-weak guard and you're not getting anywhere.
And the symptoms?
Pardon me?
Just pain? The symptom? Just pain?
The symptoms, that's instantaneous. That's a break that is, it's a fracture that happens right away. It's one of these unfortunate occurrences. Some people may have a stress fracture or something that they're working through, but you won't know that until it's too late. For this, it was an impact fracture, and it hadn't healed fully before I re-fractured it again, and that was that lengthy process to allow it to re-heal.
The bulk of our injuries in running are going to come from overuse and
Exactly.
continuous stress, not like this was a very acute thing just happened all of a sudden. And there may have been something in the background before that happened. And I think when they are just continuous and and you're getting repetitive strain on something, that's when you are best to go and see somebody straight away.
And in line with that,
often put it back
there's
on
a
track.
huge correlation with the people I work with them feeling like they're getting injured or dealing with stress and strain that is abnormal. There's a huge correlation to that flaring up and them coming off of their personal daily recovery strategies. And what I mean by that is the foam roller, the stick, a myofascial ball, a hard ball for your foot. There's a lot of things that you need to be doing when you're stressing your body in this new way to allow your body to release on a daily basis. And you can prevent a lot of these things from getting out of hand personally. For me, my crux was always my calves. They just were not conditioned for this. It's taken years for my body to be conditioned. And the stick, the personal massage stick, I had to do that for 5 to 10 minutes a day. And if I did, I could get up and run again the next day. And if I didn't, my run would be compromised the next day. But it was just focusing on that. So all of us have different biomechanical issues that will pop up. And whatever that ends up being, there's a self-treatment that you should be doing that's going to help release that on a regular basis. And then maybe you complement that with a treatment from a professional once every couple of weeks, once a month, whatever your budget allows for, that prevents those from getting out of hand. And the general rule is this: if you have something right now that you've been experiencing for more than 2 weeks, it's time to start thinking about getting it looked at. If it's beyond 3 weeks, you should have someone assess it already. And a lot of times a physio session will give you an idea of what you're dealing with, and they will send you off with the information that you need to keep that at bay and to help the recovery process. But certainly after 2 weeks and 3 weeks, you need to be asking someone what's causing this, because it will not get better just by pushing through.
I've often said that if it changes my running style at all, if I'm limping or doing something different, I'm trying to toe strike on purpose because my heel hurts, or that's my indicator, I'm done. Like,
Absolutely.
step
Any
off
compromise
straight
of
away.
biomechanics.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. Yeah. Thank you. That was a very thorough
That was
answer.
like,
You
yeah.
answered everything. What was I going to go for? I love I was going to ask you about, do you have a massage therapist that you use, or do you see a physio? Do you have a chiro that you go to on a kind of constant basis just to check in? But actually, I think you answered the question by saying you have a foam roller, you have the stick, and you just do these things by yourself until you.
I do the majority by
need
myself,
more.
but I do see someone on a regular basis.
Yeah.
I see Jen Turner at Mobeo. I've been seeing her for years. She's a good friend. She works with the National Olympic team for cycling. She's very talented.
Yeah.
So what I need is someone to reset the deeper nuances of that'll set in from training, so that I can continue to stay on stuff myself. I've only seen Jen a couple of times in the last few months. When I get into big mileage training and things start to flare up, I might get in to see her 3 times a month, and I need that. And you know, just as I know, when I need someone to help me out with these things.
Okay.
But yeah, it's money well spent, but you need to head it off. You can't just assume it's going to get better.
Good answer. We have about 8 minutes left, and I just wanted to talk specifically about Knacker. Go ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead.
There's one thing I specifically wanted to say about Knacker, and I don't want to forget to say it.
It's a
So
good race, and it's
I will
hard.
speak for the next
It's
35
really
minutes and
hard.
then let you talk again. The Knacker. First and foremost, I always love that the Knackers, that Kelsey and everyone does such a great job with this race that we get all the rookies and all the new people to sign up for it. And it's almost like it's lost somewhere in translation that this is one of the hardest 50Ks in the entire country. So you've signed up for one of the hardest 50Ks you could possibly imagine as your first ultra. So congratulations on that.
Good work.
The Knacker for the course itself, a couple of what I consider to be the complexities of the course that I share with people when they ask. As you know, undoubtedly, it starts with a 4,000-foot climb up Black Mountain. Here's the mistake that I guarantee half of you will probably make even after I tell you this right now. So my example is a very elite mountain biker, Kevin Calhoun. Kevin Calhoun signed up for the Knacker a few years back, and I was working at North Shore Athletics, and his girlfriend was running it as well, now wife. And he wanted some advice on the race, so I gave him this advice. And he went out and made it to the second aid station before his day was done. The first 4,000 feet is it will annihilate you, it will ruin your day, and the reason is this. It's a race, and races start fast, and people do things they shouldn't be doing. So the race gets strung out immediately, and everybody gets talking, and they start moving. And before you know it, you're in a single track, and you're in a line. So now you're ahead of where you think you should be, but you're in a group of people, so you're going to keep doing it. And you're pushing a little bit, and you might be like, well, we'll just see how it goes. Everybody goes up and over black too fast, especially their first time. It's the number one thing that will put your day out the window. I've said this to Tom years ago. You say to someone, you should not start too fast. And they go, okay, I'm not starting too fast. This feels good. And it's excitement, your adrenaline is rushing, there's people running, it's a race. What you should be sensing, and my best races have happened when I have absolutely sensed this, you should be feeling, I'm going too slow. That's the only thing you should be feeling at the beginning of your race, at any ultra, but especially Knacker. Until you can actually say to yourself, in your head, I'm going slower than I think I should be, you're going too fast. The first hour of your race will dictate the rest of your day. With the Knacker, you're going like this for your first hour, so it's even more complex. I told Kevin Calhoun this, and on the way down into Cyprus, on the other side of the mountain, I caught him, and he looked at me and said, I effed up, didn't I? And he was out, and he is an incredibly talented athlete that could have done great that day and just didn't run an intelligent race. Black Mountain, going over into Cyprus, I can't stress enough that if you slow down, you will have a better day from there to the finish. And I was fortunate because the first time I ran Knacker in 2005, there was someone named Paul Purin who was deeply embedded in our community back then, and Paul was a friend of mine. And Paul said, you're not allowed to go beyond me right now. We're running together for this. I'm going to show you how this is done. And the race started, and all I could think was, but I want to beat that person, and I think I should be ahead of them, and I'm fitter than that person. And he's like, just no. And I was doing this, like just twitching, and like, can we go now? Can we go now? And Paul was like, no, this is how you race an ultra. And at the 3/4 mark of the race, he looked at me. He's like, now is where you can race. Now is where you can do what your body will allow you to do. And I was like, all right, gotta go, thank you. And my first ever Knacker, and I finished 5th. And 5th or 6th, maybe 6th. And that was one of the proudest days I had in my life up until that moment. And it was 100% because Paul Purin said, I'm gonna show you how to race this race. And he taught me a valuable lesson at the very beginning of when I started doing this, 2005. I started in 2004. I haven't forgotten it. I've gone and messed up that a couple of times and always paid the price. So I can guarantee you one thing beyond anything else. Slow down. STFD. You will have a much better race on the back half of the Knacker because of it. And the other thing is, you look at the profile and you think, first half, really challenging. Second half, much easier. the opposite. It really is the opposite. You need to set yourself up for success on the second half, and the way you do that is slowing down at the beginning of the race. Just if you take nothing else with you tonight, that's the number one thing I want to impart on people. So yeah, there's
So somebody asked a question about pacing and heart rate and perceived exertion, and I think I might tell me if I'm wrong. I wear a heart rate monitor now. I did for a long time. I don't really look at my heart rate until later. I just like seeing what it is. It's kind of fun. But I don't really look at it, and I often find that I'm running by feel.
Yeah.
And I can tell not by heart rate, but by respiration. I can tell if I'm redlining it. It's
Yeah.
too much, and especially if I'm not redlining it. And I'm not breathing heavy, and the person behind me is going, I'm like, he's gonna die soon. I think, I don't know about you, if you can speak to that just quickly.
So what Tom said is right. I mean, I don't run by heart rate either. I briefly, years ago, touched on it. I wear it when I ride my road bike, because it keeps you from having a heart attack, because I get carried away on the road bike. But with the running, it very much is perceived effort, especially in ultras. It's very difficult to contain your heart rate over a course such as the Knacker. It can certainly be beneficial, but what you, again, with your training runs, Knacker runs, group runs, it's about learning that perceived effort and learning what it feels like with your body when you're pushing too hard. We all have a pretty good sense of when we're pushing harder than we should. We just need to condition ourselves to listen to ourselves a bit better when we're out there. Yeah?
My thing that slows me down the most is technical trails. I learned to run in California where everything is, in Western states was considered a technical trail. And if you run it, you know it's like a road.
Yeah.
So what's the tips for technical trails and keeping your pace? Often I'm slow on the down than the up.
So there was also a question about like relevant workouts if you're kind of 5 weeks out and wondering about what workouts to do. This doesn't apply to everybody. Yeah, cram for the exam. Cram for the exam. There's not a blanket answer for this, but for me, that first year I ran it, I did have a coach, and she was getting me to do downhill intervals. And I'd never heard of this at the time. I didn't know a lot anyways. But what I found strange is that a lot of people after the fact really weren't used to doing downhill intervals. You do uphill intervals. You're working on your lactic threshold. Well, the Knacker is highly technical, and a lot of people suffer late in the race with their quads are not conditioned to accept the downhills. Now, when Kevin Titus, if you know his name, he held the course record for many years, and the year he broke it, he lived in Whistler. He ran to Snowline and down on Whistler Mountain. That was his training, and Snowline goes higher, so his training runs got longer. But his conditioning was running down Whistler Mountain, and he attested to that being why he was able to break the record that day. So the downhill workouts should not be overlooked. I do training programs that we set up for people, and that's built in for races like this and races like Squamish. Is downhill intervals to condition your quads, and ideally you're doing some of this on Knacker terrain as well, so that you're getting the proprioceptive feel for what it is to step over that mess of a trail that we have out there for the Knacker.
Yeah, like the Testamental website says on it, ride the course, ride the course, ride the course, and I think that lends itself to Knacker as well. Run the course, run the course, run the course. Just get to know. I mean, if you get to a point where you're like, I know this corner, I know that route, I know where to step here, and you do get to that point, hopefully.
I know we didn't get a chance to cover it, but I'm going to throw it in real quick. It's not going to be quick. Taper strategies. You mentioned that we wanted to touch on this.
Yeah.
So tapering into a race, I know a lot of people have this question. Tapering. Inexperienced, it should be about 3 weeks. If you have more experience, if you've been a lifelong runner, if you've done this before, if you have a good sense of your body, a lot of people will push it to 2 weeks. Anybody I'm coaching that is new to a distance or new to something, I get a 3-week taper going on. Now, tapering doesn't mean you lay on the couch and do nothing. You still keep your body moving, but you cut your mileage. You cut your mileage, you focus on recovery, you focus on sleep, but you're still moving your body. One of the key workouts that I have found has led to success across races from Hurt to Knacker is a downhill specific workout. So your body, your quads specifically, they get strengthened by eccentric loading. So there's science that says if you run down BCMC tomorrow, you're not going to be able to walk for the next 2 days, most likely if you haven't done it on a regular basis. But what's happened is you've created a resiliency in your quad. And that has a lifespan, a half-life of about 6 to 8 weeks maybe. So what you want to do going into an ultra, and especially the Knacker, is you want to have yourself as fresh into that half-life as possible. So what I get my athletes to do, depending on their experience, is somewhere from 10 to 14 days out from the race. I have them do a downhill specific workout.
Not 3.
Not 3
Because I
days.
misinterpreted that.
Not
I did
3
it
days.
3 days.
7 days out for some people that have a bit more experience is certainly acceptable, but it's nice to give yourself a little bit more time since a lot of people are doing this for the first time. A downhill workout, and whether that's BCMC or mountain highway or whatever's going to work for you, but the goal from that workout is this. You want to take your ascent easy and you want to push the descent as fast as you can, and your goal is to make your quads hurt in the 2 days after the race. You want to leave yourself a few days afterwards with a tightness and a soreness in your legs. And that will eventually dissipate, and what will be left behind is a resilience in your quads that will assist you on race day. So again, I've structured this in with a lot of people, and I have had no negative feedback from this, and on a personal level, it's led to great success on the races that I've done as well. But that's something that I've come up with personally over the years. I haven't seen it anywhere else.
I just wanted to ask about that though. So I'm assuming that you do sort of a graded build up to that though, because as far as I understand, I mean the sort of deceleration and the eccentric delayed recovery thing, that a lot of people have joint issue responding to that as well. Like there tends to be a risk of getting injured with doing that kind of training if you're not building up to it. So I just want to,
Yes, thank you very much for pointing that out. So in line with this, you would also be doing a weekly or bi-weekly downhill workout. So you might do an uphill workout and then a downhill workout week to week. But yeah, you're doing downhill workouts in your training, and that's your last downhill workout, but you're pushing it a little bit harder than you have on your others to leave yourself with a sore muscle, but certainly not to be stressing the joints and pushing into injury. So yeah, thank you for putting that in. Obviously, we don't want to just all of a sudden do a downhill workout as hard as you can, and then I get a phone call saying I can't even start the damn race and I hate you. Yeah, this is with doing downhill workouts, and if you haven't done them, and you've got 5 weeks to go with training, I would suggest looking at getting a couple in if you can.
Brilliant. Thank you. There's a lot of information here, and I don't want to keep people sitting any longer. There's hopefully some shopping to do if you're interested. Gary and I are going to be here. I'm sure you'll have questions for him further if you like. He would like to say something quickly, but I would like to first thank him very much for taking the time out of a crazy schedule and ask him this question in front of everybody. When will you challenge the course record again?
I love the Knacker. It's absolutely one of my favorite all-time races, and if I could do the Knacker every year, I would. The biggest
You're allowed
thing
when you win.
the biggest motivator for me in trying to win the race was so that I would get that lifetime. When you win, you don't have to go through the lottery, and I can be Peter Findlay eventually, who does the race every year. But there's also another race that happens on that weekend called Hard Rock, and it's 100 miles in Colorado at altitude, 30,000 feet of ascent and descent, and it's the most impossible race in the world to get in the lottery process. You get a 2% chance in your first year. Every year your tickets double, so it's 1 ticket, 2, 4, 8. Usually you're up in the 30s, 60s, or 120s before your name gets drawn, which is 5 years. I go to Colorado last year and will go again this year to crew and pace for people so that when I finally get that magic ticket drawn, I will know the course and I will know how to address my body at altitude, and I will be prepared to have my best day on that course. So until I get into Hard Rock, Knacker won't happen, but I want to come back and race Knacker absolutely as my focus race in the coming years, and really look forward to that happening eventually.
Change the date?
After 28 years, yeah, probably time to change the name. If anybody could influence that, it would be you, Gary, but we look forward to having you back.
Thank you. I talked about the coaching a little bit. The coaching service I have is with Eric Carter. He's a PhD student in the effects of altitude on elite endurance athletes. So he's the brains, and then I just basically stand here and give stuff away. Ridgelinecoaching.com is our website, and we do structured programs. We do one-on-one coaching. We're currently sold out. We have a bit of a wait list, but we also sell 19-week training plans for 50K or 50-mile races. Obviously, you're not going to do a 19-week training plan at this point, but I want to give away one of these 19-week plans just so you can take it and have a look at it, and then you can have a reference point. I see fear on some people's faces, like they don't want to know what they should be doing right now. But yeah, so we'll give you a free download a copy of a training plan, and you can have a look at how we structure it out. So is there any way that you would prefer to do the draw? What's the question we can ask?
25 push-ups.
25 questions?
No, push-ups.
Push-ups? You got names in there?
Want to do it with yours?
Nice.
Yeah.
So I was going to give away some things as well.
Yes.
To people who had posted questions
Perfect. By show of hands, who here posted questions to the Facebook website?
I have everybody's name on this.
Do it.
But, so I was just going to ask you guys, there's 13 people here, to pick a number between 1 and 13.
Sounds good. I get 7.
13 is a lucky number.
So, 13 will be for...
13 wins the training program.
Yeah, and 7 will be for a pair of shoes from Salomon.
I'm sorry.
So just,
So Tanya Percy
Is 13?
Yep.
There you go. Oh, nice.
Laddie, she's right there.
pair of shoes.
Oh, nice. And huge thank you to Gary. If you have questions, he's around for a little while. And thank you all for coming.
thank you, Gary. So we will be around. There's a lot of experience in the room, so please do shop. We're gonna wrap the shop. Ginny, you'd like the shop closed by about 20 after 9 or so?
Yeah.
Yeah, so please feel free to do your shopping. And Gary, I had to smile when your eyes lit up at caffeine. Just a little bit of a thank you.